Don't worry, I'll edit down everything so that it sounds stupid. Hey, what's up? My name's Kylie. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today is very special. I have my dad with me.
Hello, everyone.
His name is Matt, by the way. So recently, I've been home for over a week now, and every night of the week that I've been home, we've been watching horror movies. So today we're just gonna talk about them all. My dad is basically the reason why I love movies so much. I've always just grown up being shown movies by him, like Indiana Jones and Star Wars and all that good stuff. And recently I've introduced him to the world of horror. So today we're gonna be talking about The Platform, Insidious, Amityville Horror, a bunch more. So
well, I will have to say that I am a newbie to horror movies. So in my life of watching all the movies that I've loved that I inherited from my own dad, Kylie's grandfather, I have not been attracted to horror movies too much. So this is a whole new thing for me, but I've enjoyed it.
Good stuff. Okay, so the first movie that we're gonna be talking about is The Platform. This came out in 2019 and it's rated at an 83%. So in The Platform, in the future, prisoners housed in vertical cells watch as inmates in the upper cells are fed while those below starve. One man voluntarily becomes a prisoner and ultimately decides it's up to him to bring equality to the system. Okay, so this is the #1 movie on Netflix right now. It's a Spanish film. Yeah, right? Very surprising, but I just want to know, okay, so first let's just do initial thoughts. Do you want to start?
Yeah, I do. This one is an easy one for me. I have never seen a film like this film. To give you a quick heads up, don't watch this dubbed in English, switch it over and watch it in subtitles in Spanish. Dubbed in, it's not nearly as good.
No.
We learned that in about 5 to 7 minutes and made the change. You know, Kylie said that I'd be doing these movies in a 1 to 10 scale. This thing has a scale all its own. I've never seen anything like it.
No, my initial thoughts was it's very gross. I think that the visuals obviously are effective. I feel like some of them kind of take it too far. It does involve some cannibalism, as you would imagine, which it's not really a spoiler. This movie's littered with cannibalism, and it was a stressful time. I think that it makes good social commentary. I think that the super intense visuals with the prisoners walking all over the food and taking more than their share, I thought that was fine. I thought that was good. But then I'm gonna do individual questions for each movie for my dad just to keep the conversation stimulated and keep things interesting. So my question for you for this movie, what did you think of the ending? We're gonna spoil it because it's the #1 movie on Netflix right now. I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen it if you're horror fans, so we're gonna spoil it right now. But what did you think of the ending?
Well, the ending ended at the bottom, and I thought it was a bottom level ending.
Yeah.
I thought it was a big letdown. This movie created some of the strangest emotions that I've ever had in a movie. I've never seen anything like it. And I will say that it goes along with, while we're all at home on this virus situation, there were a lot of comparisons when you watch this movie to how people are acting, going out into stores, buying hand sanitizers, toilet paper, rice and bread and all those things. And if you really look at it, this is a statement about those type of things and about a hierarchical society.
Yeah, people taking more than their share. It's very, very blatant social commentary, but effective nonetheless.
Yeah.
So why don't we rate this out of 10? I am giving it a 4 out of 10. I'm giving it a couple points because the social commentary is good and I think it's relevant to right now, but there's no payoff on the ending, so I'm knocking off 6 points for that. It's just...
Wow. I had a difficult time with this, Kylie. I thought it couldn't go on the scale, and then when I looked at the movies we're going to talk about today, I thought about it and I thought, okay, what did it really mean to me? And on that basis, I'm going to give it a 6.
Okay. Oh, and Dora. That's our cat. All right, well, I think that'll do it for our thoughts on The Platform, unless do you want to explain your 6 out of 10, or?
No, but when you see it, you'll decide that it's one hell of a way to quit smoking.
Yeah, yep. So next up on this list is Dark Skies, and if you follow my YouTube channel, I have talked about this movie before and you can check that out. It's in a list of low-rated horror movies that I love. This movie, it came out in 2013 and it's rated at a 41%, which infuriates me, but you can just watch the other video. In Dark Skies, Lacey and Daniel Barrett share a peaceful life in the suburbs with their sons Jesse and Sam. However, that peace soon shatters with a series of disturbing events that escalate. When it becomes clear that their family is being targeted by an unimaginably terrifying, deadly, and possibly alien threat, Daniel and Lacey draw on their courage and determination to protect their family and identify what is after them.
This movie, you don't know it's an alien movie for a long time. You're not sure what it is. It doesn't become an alien movie till more than halfway through the movie, I would say.
Yeah, I would say so, just because you're aware that it's a paranormal entity, but you don't know exactly what it is.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's kind of, they make it kind of apparent in the trailers, so it's not totally a spoiler if you've seen that based on my synopsis and everything. But my initial thoughts, I love this movie. This is one of my favorite horror movies. Actually, would you call it horror? It might be more suspense.
Yeah, it's a bit. I would call it horror and sci-fi and suspense, kind of a combination of all three, maybe.
Oh yeah, one reason why I love this so much is because there's very little gore, very little blood, very little normal horror elements, and it focuses mainly more on what you can't see. I've explained this to you before, but yeah, there's moments where, you know, the mom will look into her son's room and you just see this shadow of this being, and so it just leaves a lot up to your imagination. And if you have a mind like mine and my dad's, where your imagination kind of takes things to crazy places, that's really effective. It's, you know, different for everybody, but that's why I like it so much. But my question for you, because you like this movie, right?
I did.
Okay. So my question for you is, why do you think this movie is only rated at a 41%?
I think that maybe because a lot of it is what I call a suggestive scare, as Kylie's mentioning here, that maybe hardcore horror people, it takes too long to get as scary and interesting as it becomes. But I felt that's what gave it a lot of the strength of the movie to make it different. It was not in your face right from the beginning. It was very slight at the beginning. Not sure where you were going, and I was. It took me a while to warm up to the movie, and by the time I was done, I felt very similarly to Kylie.
If you had to rate it out of 10, what would you give it?
I gave it a 7, Kylie.
You gave it a 7?
I did.
I give this movie a 10. It's one of my favorite alien movies. I think it honestly might be my favorite alien movie, besides maybe Signs.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Signs is a great one.
That is a great one.
But I think it's just because they leave so much to the imagination, and I love the acting in this movie. I really like J.K. Simmons' character. So
I do want to add in that, being that this is my first run at the horror genre, that my scale and Kylie's might not be quite the same right now.
Yeah.
But if you see us another time, my scale may adjust. So for my first week of this, it was a 7 for me. The next time you see us, things might change.
You never know. Okay, so the next movie on our list is Dr. Sleep. So as we know, this was a huge horror movie. This came out last year in 2019, and it's rated at a 77%. In Dr. Sleep, struggling with alcoholism, Dan Torrance remains traumatized with the sinister events that occurred at the Overlook Hotel when he was a child. His hope for a peaceful existence soon becomes shattered when he meets Abra, a teen who shares his extrasensory gift of the shine. Together they form an unlikely alliance to battle the True Knot, a cult whose members try to feed off the shine of innocence to become immortal. This movie was a wild ride. My initial impressions was it was a little too long. I think 2.5 hours was a bit much. There were definitely some scenes and some things that could have been removed, and I think it would have helped the pacing a little bit, but what were your initial thoughts?
Well, I was let down for one thing. It had a lot of build-up. It was based on a Stephen King novel. It was based on Misery, which was a very famous horror movie from my younger days. Wasn't even in the ballpark of Misery. I think it dragged a lot at times. There were some interesting parts about it as far as the shine and the connection between people, but it really never grabbed me.
Yeah, an interesting fact though, apparently Stephen King was much more pleased with this because he wrote the sequel to The Shining, Dr. Sleep, after fans were asking what happened to Danny, what happened to the kid, what was, his development like. So he wrote the sequel, and he was more pleased with this movie, I guess because it was more in line with what his vision was for The Shining. Apparently he hated what Kubrick did with the original Shining, which is interesting because I think that fans preferred the original much more. In terms of a sequel, it felt so disconnected, but apparently was more in line with what Stephen King wanted. I don't know. A lot of this movie didn't sit well with me. There's a lot of violence towards children especially, and things like that. Just very, very dark. Anyways, my question for you is, Do you think that violence against children, mind you, extreme violence in the case of this movie against children, should be utilized in horror, or is that crossing a line?
I felt like it was crossing a line a little bit. I was surprised in this movie that it would go that far. I was uncomfortable with it. That hurt how I felt about the movie, I would have to say.
Yeah, me too. I remember, I can't remember if this was another YouTube video I saw, but someone mentioned that there were 3 rules, and I cannot remember the third. But one of them is you don't hurt animals, so you don't hurt pets. You don't hurt children, and I cannot remember the third, but it's something that they're just lines you don't cross in horror, basically, and this movie definitely does that.
Crossed a lot of lines.
Yeah, definitely. So what would you rate it out of 10?
I gave it a 6. I honestly felt that adding the hotel on, which is a kind of a star of the original movie, I felt like it felt at the end they just added the hotel because they needed it, but they didn't never need to even go there.
I know, that was the crazy part. It actually, with the climax of the movie, I'm not going to spoil it, but you realize he didn't even need to be in the hotel.
No.
It was just...
They did it because they felt they need to.
It was the only part of it that really made it a sequel. And the fact that it was following Danny, but it was him as an adult. So it's basically a fully different person. That was insane. I mean, I think that for me, so I actually gave it a 6 as well, so we're matching on that. Because for me, the hotel at the end is what saved me. I think it was more of a fan service thing and just me being a fan of The Shining and seeing the hotel and recreating the old scenes there. That's what I liked about it. But other than that, yeah, just very weak as a sequel, and yeah, just super weird. I don't really understand why it's rated a 77%. That seems really high, but I guess a lot of people were pleased with it, so.
They spent a lot of money, and I don't think they got enough bang for their buck.
Probably not. So the next movie we're going to talk about is What Lies Beneath. This came out in 2000, and it stars Michelle Pfeiffer and Harrison Ford, and it's rated at a 46%. In What Lies Beneath, Norman's life and marriage seems so perfect that when Claire tells him of hearing mysterious voices and seeing a young woman's image in their home, he dismisses her terror as delusion. Claire moves closer to the truth, and it becomes clear that this apparition will not be dismissed and has come back for Dr. Spencer and his beautiful wife. Okay, so initial impressions, you want to start this time?
Well, Kylie, you know I'm prejudiced. I love Harrison Ford.
Me too.
So that just goes without saying for us, but I loved the movie. I really did. The twist, a great twist in the movie. It was going a lot of different directions, and I had no idea where it was going, but I loved the ride.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, so my initial impressions are basically the same. We love Michelle Pfeiffer, we love Harrison Ford together. It was a lot of fun. It's a good movie. So my question for you, this is going to be a spoiler, so if you don't want to hear any spoilers, just head it to this time right here. My question, do you like Harrison Ford as a villain?
I was uncomfortable at the end finding out he was the villain.
It's very weird. We're used to him with his whip and his hat being the hero. Yeah,
it was difficult to see him but he was a great person for that, and for people that knew him going into the movie, I think it makes the twist even better.
It does, it really does, because this came out in 2000, and Indiana Jones, did that come out in the 80s? Or
80s, late 80s and the early 90s. So
right, okay.
Between Star Wars and Indiana Jones, I mean, we know him as Indy and Han Solo, along with a lot of other good movies.
Yeah, so great action hero, and then here he is in 2000 as a villain. It's very uncomfortable, but you don't find that out until the ending. Yeah. Anyways, what do you rate this out of 10?
I gave it an 8.
You gave it an 8? Okay. I gave it the same, and I took away a couple points because in the beginning, Michelle Pfeiffer's character is kind of stumbling down this path that doesn't have anything to do with the actual plot and how things resolve. She's kind of obsessing over her neighbors and things like that, and they don't really have anything to do with it, and so that part kind of dragged for me, but the rest of the movie I really enjoyed.
I agree. Yeah. That part did drag you a different direction, purposefully obviously, but I felt they put a little too much into that, kind of to take you off the trail. Yeah. I think they could have shortened that part a little bit.
Yeah, because I love a good misdirect with a twist. I mentioned that before in my videos, but yeah, this one just dragged on a little bit too long. So, all right, the next movie we're talking about is Visions. This movie is on Netflix right now if you want to check it out. So is What Lies Beneath. This came out in 2015. It's rated at a 19%, so a little bit low. In Visions, after leaving her city life behind and moving to a vineyard with her husband, pregnant Emily begins experiencing terrifying visions. I'll start the initial thoughts. I think that the premise is unique once you find out the twist at the end, but everything leading up to it is very corny, very cheesy. It's not necessarily slow, it's just all the scares consist of jump scares, and that doesn't interest me very much because it's cheap. I honestly don't like jump scares that much, but what do you think? What were your initial thoughts?
Well, cheesy and wine. It's about vineyards. I had sour grapes about the whole movie, to tell you the truth.
Okay, so I thought that the premise was unique, and I think it could have been done better. So my question for you is, what elements or what people could have been involved to make the execution of this movie better? What would it have benefited from?
I felt like she should have had contact with probably a few more characters in the movie. Might have made it a little bit more interesting. She leaned on just a very few people that she actually had contact with as she was going through this kind of cheesy, frustrating, drawn out lead up to where they were headed.
Yeah, I know. I was wondering, where are her parents? Where are her siblings? Does she have no one else to rely on? Because a lot of the movie, she's getting zero support from her husband, and her friends are kind of pressuring her to do weird things, and you don't ever see her family, and they never explain, are they all dead? Like, why is she so alone in this?
I mean, she's leaning on somebody she just meets at a baby yoga class and treats her like her best friend, and you and I were both questioning that right away.
Yeah, which she didn't at all, but I mean, I guess that's kind of a trope. You have your main girl lead in a horror movie that's just clueless and makes stupid decisions, and you're yelling at your TV like, why are you doing that?
Yeah, I agree.
What did you rate this movie out of 10?
I have to go to my paper for the first time here. I gave this one a 5.
I did too. Okay, so we're pretty consistent with our ratings. But I think it's pretty clear. The only reason I didn't give it like a 3 or 4 is because I do like the main actress. Isla Fisher is the star of this movie. I do like her. Her acting wasn't great in this movie, even though I think she is a great actress. The reason I gave it a 5 is because I think that once you find out the twist, I think it's really unique. It was just such a poor execution that knocking off the other 5 points.
I agree with you. That it had some good things in it. That's why it was worth a 5 to me.
So the next movie on our list is Amityville Horror from 2005. This gets a 23%. When George Lutz and his wife Kathy find a beautiful new house in the small town of Amityville, New York, they think the place is too good to be true. After they move in with their kids, they find out the cheap price tag is thanks to the house's sordid history. The former tenant murdered his family after supposedly being possessed by the devil. Believing the home is haunted, the couple find a priest to help them rid the place of evil spirits. All right. What are your initial thoughts from this movie?
Well, the priest got so scared that he ran out of the house.
Yeah, in a minute. So that's not really accurate.
Yeah, that was a bad sign for that house.
Yeah.
Right for the get-go, because in any of the movies I've seen, I have never seen a priest go running out of the house, jump in his car, while the ladies chasing him down the driveway, banging on the windshield.
Like,
going, where are you going? Where are you going?
Yeah, a priest just saying, no, to hell with that.
Yeah.
Literally. It's interesting, Ryan Reynolds stars in this movie, and he himself as a person, Ryan Reynolds, is just very sassy, very witty, and that comes through in all of his characters, no matter what he's playing, like Deadpool, obviously, and other roles. And it comes through in this movie too, and I do like levity and having comedic relief in horror, but I don't feel like he's a very effective horror actor because he just has that wittiness, and his nice, fun personality just comes through a little bit too much for it to be scary for me. But what did you think about Ryan Reynolds?
I don't know. For me, he was miscast, and probably prejudiced by prior movies I'd seen him in. Yeah. And I think that kept eating at me throughout the movie, that it was him. If it would have been a different actor, the movie might have been more powerful to me.
Yeah, because he's obviously moved away from horror. He starred in the Pokemon movies and Deadpool and stuff like that. So he's definitely found his place, I think, in acting and the types of roles that he's meant for. I don't think he's meant for horror. But, you know, if you disagree in the comments, please let me know why, because I'm just a little bit confused why he was cast, but different strokes for different folks. Okay, so my question for you. This movie is R-rated, so they are allowed to show things in a lot more graphic detail. My question for you is, do you think it's effective to show everything and leave nothing to the imagination, or was that a good choice?
I think that in that particular movie, I think that was okay. As you mentioned earlier about the style of movie that you like, I like some more mystery and, you know, not quite as much in your face. But that was really what this movie was all about, was kind of being in your face.
Yeah.
And I think part of the problem was in just remembering that the movie is 2005 and Ryan Reynolds was a young guy, and I don't know how many movies he'd been in before then. You know, we're thinking of him today, but I mean, he became kind of an in-your-face character very early in that movie that became dislikable, which was uncomfortable because it was Ryan Reynolds.
It was, yeah, it was really weird, and it was him being just so rude and aggressive towards little kids too, which we've established we don't like.
Yeah, that was tough.
My rating for this movie, I gave it a 5 out of 10. I would have rated it lower, to be honest, but I gave it a 5 because I think if I saw this in theaters, I would have been terrified. But again, I tend to prefer when things are left to my imagination because that scares me more than when I can actually see all the details of something. There was this little girl throughout, this dead little girl that has this hole in her head from being shot and just veiny eyes and stuff like that, and you can always clearly see her face. And to me, that doesn't feel so much as an entity, but it does as a little girl in makeup for some reason. I don't know, it just, when you can see everything perfectly clear, they don't come off as dead to me for some reason. So I just had to knock off some points for that, and the fact that this wasn't my favorite role of Ryan Reynolds. But what about you?
I gave it a 6.
Okay.
I was still scared a lot, and it was a movie that while we were watching it, I wished I was seeing it in a theater.
Yeah, me too. So I think that creators of horror movies need to bear in mind that people aren't only going to be watching their movie in theaters now with streaming and stuff like that. That obviously wasn't around in 2005, but people need to keep that in mind because not everyone has a huge TV and surround sound, so some scares need to be more discreet or they just need to be a little bit more unique to maintain their frightening factor, because this probably would have only been good in a theater, in my opinion.
I think you're right. I think the genre of horror is affected a lot by streaming on TVs, as opposed to maybe some of the other genres of film, because some of them they're really going to scare you in the theater, and on your TV it's just not quite the same.
Exactly. So let's move on. I showed my dad the movie Insidious, which is one of my favorites. This movie came out in 2010 and it's rated a 66% on Rotten Tomatoes. So as most of you probably know, parents take drastic measures when it seems their new home is haunted and their comatose son is possessed by a malevolent entity. So as we know, this stars Patrick Wilson and Rose Byrne. This movie is pretty iconic at this point. It was one of Blumhouse's first really big movies that really put them on the map. So what were your initial thoughts?
I like this one. The concept was different than the other movies that we've been watching, as far as not being specifically about ghosts and not being specifically about murder or not being specifically about a house. This was a whole nother thing. A whole nother deal.
Yeah, conceptually it's amazing. I think it's one of the most unique horror movies that we have, and that's obviously why it spawned a 4-movie franchise, and they'll honestly probably make more. I mean, I don't think that they have plans to at this point, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did. For me, this movie holds a special place in my heart because it came out when I was 11, so it was one of the first horror movies I was introduced to. I saw the second one in theaters at the premiere. Because this sort of introduced me to horror, I have a special place in my heart, and I'm kind of biased with this. So my question for you, as a part of the boomer generation, as an older parent, what did you think of this movie? Did you think it was good, seeing it as you're older? Without the bias.
I liked it. I thought that the concept was interesting. The fact that it went to where it eventually went to was a huge surprise to me. It really turned a corner at one point in the film and went a way that I had no idea that it was going to go there.
Or the first time I saw it, I felt the same way. For me personally, watching it 10 years later, there are a couple moments that are a little bit cheesy to me now that just read is a little bit corny. For example, when she puts on the gas mask, that at the time in theaters, it was absolutely scary and it was very unique, and I was like, what? Watching it now, it doesn't hold up quite as well, even though most of the other horror elements in the movie do. So you feel the same way?
I felt the same way about the gas mask. It was a little dated, but I can only imagine seeing it in the theater originally in 2011. I wouldn't even have been thinking about that. But that was really one of the only parts of the film that I felt was dated. But even that, I was still playing along with it because I'd become so curious as to where this was going.
I know, conceptually it really ropes you in and it's so interesting, and it's only about an hour and 40 minutes long. I think it honestly could have been longer. There were a lot of moving parts and things to keep you interested and keep you engaged, even though personally I think that the sweet spot for horror movies is about an hour and a half, hour 20 minutes. Usually they don't need to be any longer than that, but this movie is a decent length as well. So what do you rate this out of 10?
I gave it an 8, and as I said to you last night, what a great name for a horror movie.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and I love in every single one, in the beginning, they flash the Insidious with the, you know.
Yeah, and it's loud music.
Yeah.
Yeah, the start, from the very start of the opening credits with the title cut, it was great.
Yeah, I know. We have surround sound too, so it was a lot. It was extra. I give this movie a 9 out of 10. The only reason I don't give it a 10 out of 10 is because some of the elements don't hold up quite as well 10 years later and not in the theater, so that's the only reason I didn't give it a perfect score. So the next movie that we're going to be talking about is 1922. This is a Stephen King adaptation and it's on Netflix. This came out in 2017 and it's rated at a 90%. So in this movie, a rancher conspires to murder his wife for financial gain and convinces his teenage son to participate. That's the only synopsis that they have on Google, and that's pretty much all you need. It's a pretty straightforward story. Do you want to start with?
I was uncomfortable with this movie from the beginning, and it wasn't the right kind of uncomfortable. I never got comfortable with this movie.
No.
It was strange and awkward. I'd never heard of this movie. I've never heard of the Stephen King book. They call it a Stephen King novella, so I think that's a short book.
Yeah.
It was uncomfortable almost from the opening scene for me.
Yeah, and a lot of more artistic horror movies have a similar feeling to them where it's just set in a world that's so apart from ours, from the normal world, and whether that be the coloring or the acting or just different elements that make it feel uncomfortable, this was definitely one of those. And some people like those, so if you're interested in artistic movies that make you feel really uncomfortable, I think you would like it. I think that's why it's rated at 90%. Otherwise, it's just a bad story that, I mean, not a bad story as in it's poorly written, it's just sad and miserable and terrible, and it only just keeps getting worse, basically.
It's a shocking. It's based around a shocking thing happening. Just shocking.
Yeah, it is. There isn't really a resolution to this movie either. It just keeps getting worse. I didn't dislike it. There's just not really anything to like about the movie because your protagonist is a terrible person.
Yeah.
You're not ever rooting for him. There's never a peak. It's never up and down. You never feel any bit of hope. It just really just gradually keeps getting worse, basically. It's an hour and 40 minutes of just misery.
I never connected with any of the characters.
No.
I just had no connection whatsoever. None of the characters in the movie were very likable at all. If Netflix got a 90 rating by somebody on this one, that's very surprising to me, and this movie they didn't have to spend a lot of money on either.
No, they didn't. The one thing that I didn't mind about this movie is their choice of their main horror element, which was rats. I mean, while that was terrible and very uncomfortable, it was very effective as a horror element, and I don't know that I've seen another movie utilize rats so much like this one did. Yeah. So, I mean, I would give it props for that. There's another movie that does a similar thing, The Possession, which is one of my favorites, which is also in the video that I talked about previously that'll be linked down below. And they center their main horror element around moths, and that is also very effective. If you can find just one key element and have that be recurring, I think that can be clever, and you know, you can utilize them in different ways and stuff like that. So I thought that was fine. So my question for you is, do you think that movies can be effective if the entire plot is someone's life simply going downhill? And what do you think the purpose of that was?
Well, that's a good question. For me personally, I don't really like a movie that just starts at a level and only goes down from there. Obviously, there's some people out there. Somebody gave it a 90, so there are people that do like it. It was just, there was never a point in this movie that I started to really relate to the plot, to the characters, to anything that was going on. I just couldn't quite grab onto it.
Yeah, it was just like, here's this family that's going through terrible things. Just look at them. Just watch them go through hell. That was basically it. And by the way, we didn't make this movie just to talk bad about movies or anything.
No.
We're both fairly intellectual people. These are intellectually based opinions and things like that. Feel free to disagree. Comment down below. Let us know why. We can talk about it. Just know that we're not just here to talk shit on movies. So what did you rate this movie out of 10?
I gave it a 4, and for anybody that's seen it or will see it, it was corny.
I actually gave it a 6 because I didn't think that it was...
Wow.
I know. I didn't think that it was poorly done. I thought in terms of production design and the way it was shot, it was actually really well done. And I think that the acting was fine.
Yeah.
Albeit it was very weird. It wasn't traditional acting, and it's set obviously 100 years ago, so there's not really a way for me to tell if it's accurate to how people acted back then or anything, but I thought it was fine and well done. Obviously I didn't like the story, didn't like the resolution, well, I mean there was no resolution, but there were things I could appreciate about it even if I didn't like the movie, you know, so I give it a 6.
I think from that side that's more of a movie buff kind of thing.
Yeah.
On that particular one I couldn't go there. I just didn't like the whole concept.
Different strokes for different folks. You might like it. I would recommend checking it out just to see if you're interested in that sort of artistic kind of a vibe for a movie. Anyways, we are gonna end this video on a much lighter note. We actually also watched the movie Coco because I love that movie and I wanted to show it to my parents, so we're gonna end this video on a lighter note talking about Coco. So this movie came out in 2017. It's rated at a 97%, which I think is so deserved. You guys have probably heard of this, but I'll just give a brief synopsis anyways. Despite his family's generations-old ban on music, young Miguel dreams of becoming an accomplished musician like his idol Ernesto de la Cruz. Desperate to prove his talent, Miguel finds himself in the stunning and colorful land of the dead. After meeting a charming trickster named Hector, the two friends embark on an extraordinary journey to unlock the real story behind Miguel's family history. So what were your thoughts on this movie, Dan?
Well, this one I suggested to Kylie just before we started this, and I thought that this movie could have been a horror movie, but Pixar made it a fun movie. I love the colors of the movie, all of the concepts. It was just a feel-good movie. I was teary-eyed at the end.
Yeah,
I'm going to say right here it was a 9 for me. Really surprised me. I loved it.
Oh my gosh, I give this movie a 10 out of 10. I cannot believe how far we have come with animation. It's so beautifully well done. I mean, if you have a nice high quality TV, you'll be able to see everything in extreme detail. And sometimes it kind of trips me out because it almost looks real. There's just so much three-dimensional stuff going on, and it very much looks like a window into a very real world. It's so beautiful and it's so well done. It makes me cry at the end. It's just very emotional.
In a good way.
Yeah, in a good way. It's very, very heartwarming, and I'm sure a lot of people have already seen it. It's a Pixar Disney movie. It's very popular, but
it does involve skeletons.
Yes.
And the dead.
And the dead. Yes. So it would be interesting to see this movie conceptually as a horror movie, to see what someone would do with that if someone got stuck in the land of the dead, because I don't believe that's been done before. But we just wanted to end this on a note of levity, a little bit of good feelings during this time. So anyways, thanks for joining me in this video. If you stuck it out to the end, comment down below and say, what's up, I made it. This again is my dad. Thanks for hanging out with us. I'm gonna be home for probably another week or so. Haven't really figured it out with this whole quarantine situation, but I think we're probably gonna do a part 2.
Yes, I'm ready.
Yeah, because I am definitely gonna make him watch Insidious part 2 because that's my favorite one in the series.
Well, we can tease him. What are we gonna watch tonight?
Is that not what we're watching tonight?
Well, we're gonna watch that, and we may also watch Train to...
Oh, Train to Busan. Yeah, the Korean film that's on Netflix.
A little bit of a tease.
Yeah, so little teaser for next time. I hope I catch you on the next one, and thanks for joining us. Bye.
Bye.